Hello and welcome. My name is Edward Wilford, and I'm the Senior Principal Analyst for IoT at Omdia, and I'm delighted to welcome today Ilan Gluck from Cox2M.
Nice to be here.
Thanks for having us today.
Yeah.
I know a lot about Cox. All of our listeners will know about Cox and the communications, the connectivity. I'm less familiar with Cox2M. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So taking a step back, Cox is a company that's been around for 125 years. We are a privately held family company that's split really into three main priorities. Mobility, which is Cox Automotive. Sustainability, we have a lot of investments in clean tech and sustainability ventures, and communications, which is Cox Communications. Cox2M falls under the Cox Communications part of the business. We were born out of a problem a sister company of ours had about 8 years ago. Mannheim, which is the largest auto auction, which is part of Cox Communication, which is part of Cox Auto. They walked across the street and said, hey, we have this problem. We have about 700,000 cars spread out across various locations globally. We need to track them. We need to know where they are, and we need to know the health of the car. We've been looking for a solution for years. We haven't found one that works. Could you potentially build something that we could use? So we got to work within a small group in Cox Communications, and that was our first foray into building and deploying IoT at scale. So we spent a lot of time, a lot of engineering work to make sure we had a robust solution that could scale to 700,000 plus assets deployed in various locations. A lot of time developing the platform upon which the Mannheim workers could view the data, and then a lot of time working on kind of integrating our solution into their ongoing process. So that's how we were born. We were just building a solution for a sister company. And then we started to take those capabilities to other areas. We said, if this works for Mannheim, there are probably other companies that would need this type of IoT at scale capability. And since then, we've expanded our business within the automotive space. We now work, in addition to automotive, we work in the smart city space. So we have a number of smart city solutions within Cox2M. And then also the industrial space, working closely with industrial manufacturers, manufacturing logistics companies to help them improve their operations, remove friction from their business, through commercial IoT. But an interesting thing happened in the years we were developing our solution for Mannheim. An interesting thing happened, which is everything we were working on, which is just the ability to deploy IoT at scale. That capability kind of became table stakes.
Sure.
And the thing that took us years to build, that was kind of taken for granted. And our customers started to ask, well, what else can you do for me? How else can you leverage connectivity to power my business? So that's when we started to coalesce around this idea of the connected environment, and that's kind of where we're at now from the evolution of Cox2M.
Now, connected environment is one of those phrases my ears pricked up when I heard it, because it just makes such intuitive sense to me to describe the way IoT is evolving. We're not just connecting a node to a gateway to the cloud and saying it's just a single connection. We are connecting a situation. We are connecting an environment. And I think, can you talk a bit more about how connected environment plays a role?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Cox Communications, our bread and butter is providing connectivity to residential and business customers. And over the years, we understood that our business customers were starting to ask more of their connectivity provider. So rather than coming to us and saying, I want Wi-Fi for my retail store, I need Wi-Fi for my stadium or office, they were coming to us with problems that they were having that we could solve through connectivity. So things like, I want to sell more food and beverage at my stadium. I want to improve safety at my school. I want to improve throughput and reduce downtime of machines at a factory. And I want you guys to provide the level of connectivity that's going to empower me to do those use case driven activities. And so that got us thinking more holistically about the solutions that we can provide to our customers, with connectivity as the backbone of of what we do to really build out what would end up being the central nervous system of a physical environment and bring that physical environment to life. So when we think about the connected environment, there are really 4 pillars that we consider, and we develop all 4 pillars within Cox. The first one, of course, is connectivity. Sure. You have to build those heterogeneous networks to empower your customers in their use case. The second pillar is compute, right? That can be advanced kind of cloud compute solutions or edge solutions or even on-prem solutions. The third pillar, which is what we're very focused on, is IoT. How are you actually generating the data? So deploying the sensors, developing the analytics on top of the sensors to make sense of the data. And then the fourth pillar, and perhaps the most important, is the experiences. How are your customers actually interacting with the data to step change how they do their business? So if you look at any environment and you look at it through the lens of those 4 pillars, that's kind of what we call the connected environment, and that's what we're working on at Cox.
So we have those 4 pillars. Can you give us sort of a demonstration? You talk us through a use case, a real-world use case of how you've put that into action.
Yeah. So take a manufacturing example for a second. So a factory has a shipping operation where they need to ship hundreds of assets every day. If you think about that environment, that factory environment, through the connected environment lens, let's start thinking about how we would solution for a goal that they have, which is to improve their shipping operation. So they have the goal, improve shipping operation. We would work backwards from those 4 pillars to determine what is the solution we would provide. So working backward, let's start with the experience. How can we change the shipping operation to remove friction? So they might say, I want all of the workers that work in the shipping operation to have access to asset location on a mobile app in real time, so they know where everything is. And I also want my truck drivers that are arriving, they should also know where the assets are in real time on a tablet that sits in their truck. That's kind of the experience we want to enable. That third pillar is, what sensors do we need to enable that? So they might deploy asset tracking capabilities, and that's what we do at GearTrack. That's one of the things we do. So we would put an asset tracker on every single asset in that environment so that they can visualize that information on their tablet. So in real time now, they get access, where is everything, and what is the health of that asset? That's kind of that third pillar. The second pillar is, what compute capabilities do I need to power that experience? Well, if you need real-time location, you might require edge compute capabilities because that's really a low latency use case where you need
processing in there.
You need the process really quick as something moves so they can access the data immediately. So you might, enable edge compute for that use case. And then the last layer is what connectivity is required. So if they're looking at the factory environment, perhaps we deploy a LoRa network. So all of those sensors, those possibly thousands of sensors, can communicate via that LoRa network. So if you start to look holistically at the environment and work backwards from what is the goal, you can really build a solution that is flexible to grow as you design more use cases, but also something that can deliver an ROI very quickly.
Okay, so I'm sold on connected environment. I come to you. What is the first step? I mean, the sea of protocols and standards and decisions to make. What is the first thing to do on that journey?
The first thing to do is you have to listen to your operators. You have to really understand your operation and listen to the people that are doing the day-to-day tasks to understand where the friction is. You have to spend a lot of time identifying the friction in your operation that's costing you time and costing you money, and you have to be able to articulate that very quickly, or very clearly. You have to be able to articulate it, and you have to be able to quantify it. And if you're able to spend time asking 5 whys, why is this a problem, why is it happening, etc., and you're very clear about what the problem is, you can then take that step through those connected environment pillars to determine what the solution would be. But the first step always has to be, let's be clear about the problem, because if you're not clear about what the problem is and the goal you're trying to achieve, you end up deploying a technology that you're going to sunset in a year or two because you didn't achieve the ROI that you set out to achieve.
Okay, so how do we go then from first step to sort of, you've helped companies do sort of very large scale integrations. How do you sort of manage that? How do you, what's the approach that you take on that? I'm assuming it needs to really sort of focused and organized with all the endpoints that you're dealing with all the scale you're dealing with.
Yeah, we work at the enterprise level. We work at, very large scale commercial IoT deployments, and those can be a beast. And the thing we always think at Cox2M is you can't completely ignore what's already there.
Right.
You have to work within the confines of existing technology and existing processes and an existing culture of the company that you're working with if you want to be successful. Right. So when we think about deploying a new technology, we always spend a lot of time with the IT team thinking about how are we going to enable an integration? How are we going to provide you as a customer with the right data on the platform so you can see everything in one place? So there's a lot of time spent on integrations to make sure that everything works within the confines of your existing technology systems. And then secondly, really is an operational investment, an operational challenge around change management. How do you actually get, going back to the example of the shipping operation, how do we get the individuals, those frontline workers that are working on shipping the assets, how do we get them to use the data that we're providing? How do we get them to open up that app in the morning rather than doing it the way they've done it for 100 years? How do we get them to change their behavior and see the value in changing their behavior? How do we do that effectively to change how they act? We spend a lot of time on the ground with our customers, getting them to change the behavior, invest in the change management, because again, that's the only way you're going to drive the ROI. And if you don't make that investment in change management, it's going to be 1 or 2 years, and you're going to be looking to do the next thing, and you're not going to achieve the results that you set out to.
Exactly. I think that sort of awareness of legacy devices and legacy issues is so important. And so many solutions start with, well, there'll be a clean slate and a blank canvas for us to work with, and that really never happens.
Never happens, and is the kiss of death for IoT deployments.
Absolutely.
If you ignore the existing systems and the existing processes, you will be out of there in a year or two.
No question. Now, we are all ultimately beholden to the bottom line, aren't we? How can you measure the impact of a switch to something like a connected environment? When do you begin sort of measuring your ROI, near term, medium term?
Yeah. Well, you begin the process before you even deploy.
Yeah.
You have to. So before we deploy something, even in the sales process, we work with our customers to define what are the KPIs that we're going to track. And if we meet those KPIs, what is the ROI? What is the financial benefit of meeting those KPIs? So we're very clear about what do we want to track to? And then secondly, how are we going to actually quantify that we've achieve those KPIs.
Right.
That might be working with the operational team. That might be working with the finance team to actually quantify those. But you have to define the KPIs and the measurement, how you're going to measure. You have to define those up front.
Sure.
And you have to get the buy-in from the service provider and the customer that this is what we're going for. And then you have to measure. You have to deploy, and then after a month, 2 months, 3 months, how are we doing? 6 months, how are we doing? And you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with your customer around, are we meeting the KPIs we said we were going to meet? And the service provider should have skin in the game. If the technology isn't meeting the KPIs that they said it was going to meet when they sold you the solution, they should not get the benefit. If you're not getting the benefit, the service provider should not get the benefit. And we really believe that at Cox2M because we think an IoT solution, if deployed correctly, and if you invest in the change management and you deploy toward a very specific problem, you can achieve you can exceed your ROI expectations in a matter of months.
Wow. If we're talking about data that's of use. That data is going to be sensitive to some extent. So we can't talk about connectivity without talking about security, I think, in this instance. Who has the remit for this sort of in a connected environment? Is it an IT issue? Is it an OT issue? Or how is that divided, that responsibility?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're spot on that as environments become more connected, you have to start thinking about security holistically, and you have to plan up front or things will get out of control very quickly. And it's a new challenge for these enterprises that are connecting things very quickly. And what we've seen, the most effective enterprises at managing security, it's really a partnership between that IT group and the OT group. And it has to be a partnership where you have the IT team is responsible for network protocols, network security, cyber security. But then the OT team, the operational technology team, is responsible for actually integrating those protocols and integrating those systems onto the shop floor, for example, or into the actual operation. So you can't really have one without the other.
Right.
So where we've seen it work most effectively is when companies have a joint working group with IT representation and OT representation that work together to ensure the IT group is putting the right protocols in place, and then the OT group is integrating those protocols effectively into the operation so they're actually put into practice. And that's how you achieve the security that you need for your business. And then lastly, the service providers, the technology solution providers need to move into secure by design.
Yeah.
So the way that looks for us, is embedded security on every single one of the devices. And we take that very seriously at Cox as a whole and Cox2M because we're deploying millions of tiny computers. And if each one of them isn't secured, then you have a liability. So we take that very seriously. And companies need to ensure that their technology providers take it as seriously as they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are seeing a shift from here is this chip, how do we secure it, to here is a secure, how do we design a secure chip and then integrate a secure chip into a secure network. And I think that's the building that security up level by level and keeping it consistent is the key to making sure that this data that we're generating is kept as safe as it can be.
Absolutely.
So we have our first steps. We sort of have a plan for scaling on that. Come back in a year's time. What will you be talking about then? What are the new things that you'll be bringing to market?
Yeah. We're always focused on making commercial deployments of IoT simpler and easier to do at scale. So really there's two things we're focused on. The first thing is affordability. So how do we bring the cost of IoT down to where an enterprise can put an asset tracker, for example, on every single asset that they own, whether it be finished goods, components, parts, it doesn't matter. And that's a cost problem, and we're working hard to make that possible so enterprises can deploy at scale and achieve the ROI that they need. The second thing that we're really focused on is making deployments easier. So there's a lot of different ways that we do that, from making integrations a lot simpler to making our the sensors easier to deploy on to assets. But kind of our North Star is what we think about is why should commercial technology be so much more complicated than consumer technology?
Absolutely.
I get my phone, I open it in the box, and it just works. And I understand that in commercial technology, it is more complex than that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So that's what we're always working toward. How can we make an IoT deployment of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of devices be as simple as opening up your iPhone, turning it on, and it just works? So those are our two main areas that we're always thinking of across all of our products. And we think we're at the forefront of both of those and are going to really be a driving force toward increasing IoT adoption across many industries.
Well, Ilan, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. And thanks for telling us everything about connected environments. Really interesting conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.